All right, so an important aspect of Keynesian theory, I mean, it also plays a role in real business cycle theory, but it's in particular important for the Keynesian theory, is this idea of multipliers. So the idea of a multiplier, I can view this in a couple of ways. And so I'll kind of do it without some graphs, and then we'll do it with some graphs, or show what the implications are on our graphs. And so the idea here is that labor demand goes down, right? So we talked about that before. And so maybe I will draw a graph down here that I'll add to as we go along. So I have the quantity of labor and the wage. And here's our labor supply. And here's our labor demand. So if we have downward wage rigidity, when labor demand shifts to the left, so let's say that's an animal spirit shift, right? So all of a sudden we're pessimistic. We get a decrease in employment, and we get this now difference between who wants to work and who's able to work, and we get some increase in unemployment. So employment goes down and unemployment goes up. And so what that implies is that my income is going down, right? So you can imagine if people are laid off from work, their income goes down, obviously. And so what that does is that causes then my consumption to decrease. So if I think about GDP as the sum of these things, now you might have to go back and remember what all these are, but it's consumption, investment, government spending, and net exports. So what happens is Y goes down as a result of a decrease in employment. Labor demand shifted to the left, we have unemployment increasing. That decreases consumption. Well, that decrease in consumption then causes a further decrease in income, right? So maybe I used to go and eat at a local restaurant. Now all of a sudden I lost my job and I stop eating at the local restaurant. I start making food at home to save money because of the unemployment. My income has gone down. So now there's another decrease in income, or another shift to the left in labor demand as consumption pulls back. So labor demand 3 is from the decrease in consumption. That causes a further increase in unemployment, a further decrease in consumption, and a further decrease in output, and this cycles through, right? So you can see how an initial decrease in labor demand starts to work its way through the economy and have a much bigger effect. So you can kind of think of, you've got labor demand over here, you've got income, well, we'll call it consumption down here, and you've got income. And when labor demand goes down, that causes consumption to go down, which causes income to go down, which then causes labor demand to go down, and this cycles its way around and magnifies the initial shock. And you can see a lot of that happening right now in the economy, right? So all of a sudden, my particular business, maybe I sell cars. So all of a sudden, people can't come and buy cars. So my demand for labor goes down. Well, I lay off my employees. Now their income has gone down. So now they don't go and buy the stuff that they used to buy. So now I don't go to Chipotle anymore. I don't go to the restaurant because I got laid off from my job as a car salesperson. Now Chipotle's labor demand is going to go down. Those workers lose their jobs, etc. Right? So you can see how an initial shock plays its way through and causes a much bigger contraction. And so this is at the heart of Keynesian theory, that a small change in optimism could have a big change on the economy. And the only way to undo this potentially, as we'll see, is for the government or Federal Reserve to interact in the economy or interject in the economy. Okay, so our last idea here in business cycles is one that could come into play no matter which theory I propose, but could on its own stand as a potential explanation for business cycles. And this comes through our study of investment. which is an important driver of the marginal product of labor, meaning investment, remember, is how firms gain capital. So investment is firms buying machines and equipment. So if I buy more machines and equipment, I need to hire more workers because those workers are more productive. So as investment decreases, so does the marginal product of labor. As I start buying less capital, fewer machines, buildings, etc., then the workers are going to be less productive. So if I only have one machine to make buckets at my factory, my workers are only so productive. If I add a second machine, those workers are more productive. My labor demand is going to increase. If I decrease the number of machines I have, my labor demand is going to go down. Now, why that matters is that investment requires the credit market in order to function. So if I own a bucket factory and I want to buy a new machine, I typically have to go to the bank to get a loan to buy the machine. So it requires on the credit market to get investment. That was what we talked about before. So I have the quantity of credit here and the real interest rate R as the price of credit. And we had supply and demand for credit. And that told us how much we had at what particular interest rate. Now, one thing that can potentially instigate a recession is if there all of a sudden are problems in the credit market. So for example, maybe there starts to become an increase in defaults on mortgages. So all of a sudden people aren't able to pay their mortgages for whatever reason. All of a sudden that causes solvency issues for banks. The bank's balance sheet, the assets take a hit. Its stockholders' equity, the difference between assets and liabilities, goes down. And as that happens, it causes a shift to the left in the supply of credit. Banks aren't able to extend as much credit because they're having problems of their own. That would cause the quantity of credit to decrease and the real interest rate to increase. And so that would cause investment to go down. Labor demand goes down. And we enter this same cycle that we just went through in the last slide. So another potential explanation for recessions, one that can be very relevant, was relevant in the 2007 to 2009 recession, is that the banking sector, financial sector, has problems. Supply of credit decreases, investment then decreases, and that cycles its way through the economy. All right, so those are our main explanations of business cycles. And so what we're going to do next is move on to learning objective 9 and try to put some of this together and understand the implications of these different theories.